My very, very special guest is with me. He's been very, very patient. I thank him for that. Michael Tsarion, michaeltsarion.com is the website, and I've been following you for a very, very long time, Michael. Please introduce yourself to the listeners. I'm sure they know you, but tell us how you began making documentary films and authoring a series of books.
Well, that started way back. I've been researching subjects like symbolism in movies and symbolism in rock videos and stuff since about 1982. It started then with magazines and the symbolism of the various paramilitary organizations in Ireland. A good deal of sacred geometry, a good deal of geomancy was involved. At that time, of course, there wasn't that many books out on the subject, although there were some really good ones, though, and those books still stand strong today. So there was something out there. There wasn't that much in Ireland, so it wasn't until I got to America. I've been back and forth a couple of times, and when I went back in the 80s, we were really lucky to not only have access to really good bookstores on the subject, and but we also met some very interesting people that sort of motivated me enormously.
Hang right there. We're coming to a quick break. We'll be back. This is the Vantage Point. More back with more on the other side. Welcome back to the Vantage Point with your host, me, Michael Vale. This is your geopolitical panoramic view, and today it will be the exo-political panoramic view with my very special guest, Michael Tsarion, michaeltsarion.com. And let's just jump right into it, Michael. Let's talk a little bit about brain entrainment right now, which is so very, basically so very persuasive. You've done a lot of studies on that, along with Jim Keith and others, that really go to show this, but now it's wide open, it's now, readily available that you can find all this information. But I noticed, a lot of people now with NLP saying that, you can create yourself a Sirhan with a series of, let's say, whether it's audio, visual, kinesthetic anchors now, where you don't need to be right in front of the person. You can get a phone call. There can be something flashed on the TV set, and the anchor is set, and you have your mind control slave right then and there.
Yeah, that's true. But the ones that come to light, the ones that have been guilty of assassinations, they usually have gone under deep hypnosis. They usually either have been involved in the military or some other kind of organization, government, federal organization. So somebody could say that most of mankind is already under a state of mind control, especially in Western countries, and they'd be right. So it's really not that difficult at all, and even in the recent series of lectures I'm giving here in Europe on symbolism, we go into that quite a bit to show that through the advertising on television, the television is one of the best ways to entrain people. You don't need, like you're saying, the heavy hardware or prolonged periods of deep hypnosis. You can, basically do it through the television. Other writers and researchers and even mind controllers have said that man is capable of auto-hypnosis. Most of the human beings in the Western world are under a state of auto-hypnosis. And that's what makes them do the crazy things that they do. That's what makes them sign up to go to fight wars when they know that those wars are for their own slaughter. They have nothing to do with patriotism. It's what makes them go to big pharma and spend literally billions of dollars to make these corporations rich. It's what makes them sit in front of that box every day and to be entrained. A lot of the strange quirks that human beings do is actually born out of a certain level of mind control.
Absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And the thing about it is that I can remember reading a book called Psychopolitics, and it was basically a Russian guide to controlling the mind that they were giving out to students, so that they would be able to use this as a political weapon. And they talked about breaking humans like you would break horses, and they would use pain, they would use drugs, and they use hypnosis and all together. And that they said that they could create insanity, and that, they were in a situation where, if you were insane, that you would have no rights and you would have no recourse, and that suicide would be a very, very popular thing, and so that no one would ever think twice about it.
Sure, the Soviet experiment, for instance, where a lot of this techniques come from, Also, they come from Japan. One can describe the entire Soviet paradigm over there as a mind control experiment on all levels. And in fact, in the DVD we did, Architects of Control, we tried to explain in there that most of the techniques of persuasion, of hypnosis, of behavior and thought control did originate in the East. They actually were learned by the Crusaders in the 13th, 14th century, and by secret orders that we now know as the Order of Tsarion and the Knights Templar. They were privy to the kind of religious mania and the kind of regimentation of the mind that existed amongst the Saracens, the Islamic secret societies, and they realized at that point that they were going to lose dominion in the world if they didn't create soldiers with that kind of zeal. So in the early days of even the 13th century, we have the first attempts at this kind of behavior control. And the very people that we call the Knights Hospitallers, who are connected to the Knights of the Knights Templar, were very involved in pharmaceuticals and opened the first hostels. The word hotel, hostel, hospital, these are names that actually pertain directly to a secret society who were the first ones to wear the white robes with the red or black cross, the very symbols that you see on the medical leviathans today. Said on another interview quite recently that even in America you have drugstores called Rite Aid, you have Scottish Rite hospitals, R-I-T-E, which is an occult word that pertains directly to the Shriners and to the high degrees of Freemasonry. And these Freemason orgs, of course, are the very same orgs that were in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, during the time of the Crusades. So they co-opted a lot of those techniques, really used herbs, used ointments, used various concoctions. We know about the Jewish apothecaries that all down through the centuries, the Jews were expert mendicants, were pretty much high up, or at least were very good at making concoctions. They were the equivalent of the chemists that we have today, you see. So by using all of these sort of drugs also to change behavior under the pretext of doing charity, these hostels and hotels and hospitals in the 13th and 14th century were ostensibly opened to cure the sick and the leprous and the diseased people who were walking all over Europe, you see. And this, of course, then were the perfect sacrificial victims because nobody missed them, they had no homes. They could be lured into these so-called charitable institutions like these hotels and hospital, these primal, or these early hospitals. And it basically experimented on, I think there's a whole unsung story there about the early days in which victims were picked up and under the pretext of healing and curing them. And many would say that's still exactly what's going on today with all of this malpractice. There's a really dirty story, you know, taking place in the hospitals of the world today. And it's no different than what was happening in Scotland and in France and in most parts of Europe as early as the 13th century at the time of the rise of the
So they're just keeping up the tradition, huh?
Yeah, why change a good thing, you see? This has enormous power. And remember, it's part of a white magic ritual. We go to them. When we are in any type of aid, when we need aid or when we have something wrong with us, we go to these people. We put our trust in them. Now, it's okay if you're needing major surgery or something, but as Eustace Mullins has pointed out umpteen times, America was meant to be was originally based on a homeopathic system in which we wouldn't need these larger leviathans that have taken over complete control of our so-called health. And in fact, they're the very corporations making us sick. You know, so it's a terrible feedback loop at this point. But originally, America was based on the homeopathic paradigm until that was, annihilated by the powers that be out of New York City and elsewhere.
Well, you know, it kind of reminds me of what Aldous Huxley said, and really the whole Huxley family, Julian Huxley, you know, about how there'll be a sort of pharmacological revolution. And it's not that they have, these pills to make people love their servitude. They don't even care that they're slaves, that they're in this sort of bondage system. You know, all they basically care about, and they've sort of regressed to the animals, where they care about, you know, who they can screw, what they can get, and they're just, you know, caught up in this little maze. They just really haven't figured it out just yet.
Well, remember, not all puppets are on strings. So the human race that is under control, it's not a situation of direct control anymore, it's remote control. And the drugs are also used for the inevitable backlash, which comes from a psyche that is in conflict. Obviously, the human psyche is geared in its most primal origins to be free, because we know this from the time of Aristotle, moving up through Freud and Jung. The impulse within human beings is to differentiate, to find a true streak of selfhood, to answer the question of why they're here on this planet, and to basically roam freely and discover, the mysteries of life. Big Brother, down through the centuries, because we've been in this trap, we've been forced into this cage, this invisible cage. What that inevitably does is it causes a conflict within the human psyche. And so there's then a lot of different branches that come from that rotten seed.
Hang right there, Michael. We're coming to a quick break. Go to michaeltsarion.com, and if you want to be a part of the program, go to vantagepointradio.com. Your geopolitical panoramic view, you have the advantage of listening to The Vantage Point with your host, Michael Vale, and my very special guest, Michael Tsarion, michaeltsarion.com. If you don't have his DVDs, if you haven't read his books, you don't know anything. And you need to go read them, buy those DVDs and watch them. I mean, the sort of information that he puts out, is not something you can come across with Google, if you catch my drift. But Michael, it's so sad to see, the people every day shuffling in and out of the malls, and it seems like it's like they're vacuous. There's something fundamentally missing in their lives, that they're only really kind of focused on certain little things and what they can get and all that. And in comes the whole transhumanism, post-human movement of creating the perfect man and having some sort of reattuned consciousness. And also, of course, that comes into the fun readjustment of the brain, the chemistry through pharma. What do you think about that? And as far as the sort of, I guess you could say, the conclusions and the after effects of the future.
Well, it's a myth, of course. People who are psychically disturbed and fragmented inside will subconsciously be very attracted to the lure of the shutting off of the emotions that they're just habitually not going to deal with. That's one part of it. It is an attractive to the subconscious, but it's still a myth. It's not going to happen because it's just a lure. That particular global dystopia is certainly not going to come about. It's just another, sort of phantasm that's dreamt up in the minds of psychopaths who really do believe that by manipulating science, by manipulating technology, by manipulating the biology of man, by programming him constantly through the television with all of these images of post-humanism. I'm going into a lot of that in the talks I'm doing right now to show how this is being seeded. And it creates it's attractive to the subconscious mind. The people who, like we were talking before the break about, there is a certain level of trauma in the brain from living this inauthentic life that becomes so painful for people that they are more inclined then to take any kind of escape, either the escape that big pharma provides through the medication, which is a billions and billions of dollars industry, or through all the other forms of escape which are so rampant in our world today. And that includes, by the way, religion, and it includes New Age movement, and it includes so many other aspects of what we see in the world around us. You're not going to understand the world at all until people realize that it's like a matrix of escapism. Escapism from what? Escapism from the self. And the transhumanistic agenda is basically that same motive, but taken to its ultimate extreme, in which person is now living so much on the surface of themselves. Our societies are moving, as you say, completely robotic, regimented, mind-controlled, soulless, that then they will step into the phantasm, or they'll buy the phantasm of some of the most psychopathic people, which is to try and move forward towards this purgatory, this technological purgatory. What it really is, though, when you break it down, is about a man escaping from his humanness. It's the death of human nature. That's why it's called the transhuman or post-human generation or era. And see, from it there'll be no going back. If you go into my Atlantis work, it's the same thing as siding with the alien gene within us, because I believe that the people who visited this planet thousands of years ago had done the same thing on their planet. We're just recapitulating. They're just bringing our civilizations to where their civilization once was, maybe millennia ago, in which they made that decision. Now we should know about this because Star Trek, the original series, the Vulcan race. If you study the history of the Vulcan race, that is a whistleblowing attempt to tell you that there's a group of people who had amazing skills, but who didn't want to look at their emotions, who couldn't handle the so-called dark emotions, and literally then became ultra-scientific, ultra-left-brain, ultra-logical in order to escape and suppress the emotions. And it's a fantastic story there, and people think it's fiction. As a matter of fact, we are on countdown to that very kind of thing, or at least, like I say, the illusionary promise of that. And it's all rooted in a man's escapism. It's all rooted in identification with the object of our hate. We identify with these leaders. We identify with their psychopathy. That's why we're attracted to the logos. We're attracted to the symbolism that they use. There's so much dark, satanic, evil, Luciferian, anti-feminine, anti-natural symbolism out there in the media, you see, and we love it. We identify with it. We're all for it.
Matter of fact, Michael, I've seen where, people don't even know how to be themselves anymore. They represent themselves from something outward that they see on TV, and they try to act like that person. And that, they've really forgotten how to be themselves and to be their natural selves. And, men today are just sort of like spineless, spineless little guinea pigs running around with no thought of life. But then again, our whole reasons for living on this planet really have been taken away from us. And there is no really, there's no sort of rite of passage. There's no sort of thing that you can say that you do that makes you a man anymore. And we're just sort of living through the television set.
That's right. All the virtues of our forefathers have been decimated and smashed. The media is completely controlled. They've cut the thread, and the beads are all over the floor. They make us identify with these so-called pop icons whose dance movements are extremely mechanical and loaded with negative occult symbolism. They're forever showing us medication advertisements. They're forever showing us exercise machines, which also behind that there's a statement about the body, and the statement about the mechanism. It just goes on and on and on. They're pushing science and pushing technology in order to keep on. I have advertisements I'm showing in this series of lectures I'm doing, which shows you how even advertisements as early as the 1970s, 60s, and 50s were already identifying the human body with the machine in order to get people acclimatized to that, you see. And just basically to then create so much trauma outside that the mind freezes with overstimulation. A lot of people don't think about this, that it's not boredom that's the problem in our society. It's actually the overstimulation. And then when they see the kids sort of jaded and sort of shut down, or they claim that they have these disorders, that is actually an attempt of the child mind to defend itself against all that total and utter meaningless, empty, vacuous junk that the parents' life is full of, and that the world is full of. You see, they're coming in new. We can't blame them. They're not to blame. How can a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 15-year-old be responsible or guilty of the filthy, destructive world that they've been placed in? You see, it's completely irrational. But
and they're coming to this world, and, it's almost like, anytime any child comes to this world, is natural, and, they know, that something is not exactly right, and now they're labeled everything, and here, take this pill, and that'll fix your ADHD, but even when I step outside of the sort of, high-rise urban slum, and I go into a rural area that doesn't have all the sort of electromagnetic junk, it's like a load drops off my shoulders, and I feel human again.
Absolutely, and that's a very strong message that I have as well. But then when you have, in this series of talks I'm doing, I showed pictures of, celebrities and their children, and how they're over-sexualizing their children, how the advertisements do it blatantly so, Madison Avenue, and God knows this has been going on for years with these moguls in Hollywood, this overt and very sinister over-sexualization of children, both in children's pageants, and all sorts of other ridiculous stuff that the parents put these kids into, dressing them up in lingerie, making them emulate these imbecilic, satanic pop icons, and then we're wondering why pedophilia is rampant throughout the world. There's probably a reason for that, wouldn't you say? These crimes are escalating by the day, which never even existed 25, 35 years ago, except in the minds of extremely deranged people. Now it's like wall to wall.
And it's like now, if there's a sexual predator in your area, you've got to be put on a list and you've got to be watched and all of this. And now, like you said, it creates the environment so you get more and more and more and more. And, where does this lead to? When you see some kid in some beauty pageant, all dressed up looking like some trollop, what do you have to really say about that? It's insane.
Well, that's what I was talking about all the virtues being destroyed and smashed to pieces. The innocence. Innocence is repulsive to these overlords. They don't have it. They don't want their kids to have it. Half of their children are generationally mind-controlled or deeply abused. We've gone into this in the series as well, to show how so many celebrities commit suicide at a certain age, probably when, like Arizona Wilder and Bryce Taylor and Kathy O'Brien have already told us that this is when the mind control starts to weaken and break down. We know this is the case for Michael Jackson, whose last video is an attempt to show that he was trying to free himself from the control, and even the symbolic content within that video of his lets you know that it was a combination of the royal family and the Knights Hospitallers or the Knights Templar that were implicated. He uses the term arms, but anybody who knows arms or the inns of England, the arms of England...
Hang right there, we're coming to a quick... Welcome back to the Vantage Point with my special guest, Michael Tsarion, who's given me a good schooling here, and I appreciate him coming on the show. But we were talking during the break about, Michael, about some of your work you're doing now. You're going to be putting up some YouTube videos. Tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, that's an ongoing series we've been doing since March here in Europe called Age of Manipulation. It's a very in-depth look at symbolism again, carrying on from my previous work on the subject and from my DVD. One of the reasons is because I just get so many emails saying we want more, we want more, we want more. And of course now the internet's full of people who picked up on that work of myself and Jordan Maxwell on that very subject, not only of the secret society symbolism, but just generally the media symbolism, literally the subversive use of symbolism in the media. It's all over the net now. And that's fantastic. So people want more. And so I had to pause with other things I was doing. And then came to Europe to film part 2 of Architects of Control. And a gentleman here invited me to do this series on symbolism, which he personally is very much into, so, I had to say yes to that. So we're putting them up free on YouTube on my account. This is the first time I've ever had a YouTube account. It's youtube.com/unslavedfilms. The link can be found on my forum and also on the main site. Also, people can go to unslaved.com and they'll find the link there as well. And that series and many others have been put up there. I just did the last part of that talk a few days ago. So within the next couple of weeks, the final section of the talk, will be up there for people to watch. And it gets into secret societies, satanic orders. It gets into a group that I've always referred to as the cult of Dionysus, who is the name that I've used, that is for this particular cult of very highly skilled, highly artistic, highly gifted, as a matter of fact, symbolists and their offspring and their circle. It's a group that obviously is tied in with the Illuminati and the matrix of control, but they're a specific group that's been in existence for many thousands of years, as a matter of fact. They're tied into the Saturnian Brotherhood. They're tied into the other different Dionysian cults, such as the Eleusinian myths and so many other branches of this. And we name names. We look into how they infiltrated into America, for instance. A lot of people know that the symbolism got basically corrupted through organizations like the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. That has been known because that comes from the work of Dr. John Coleman and others. But people were not really aware of this other very, very important wing that I deal with called the cult of Dionysus. And we know that they exist because all throughout the commercials all over the world and in many of the movies that exist today is what is, you can tell from the symbolism that they use. The symbolism is specific. It's not just random symbolism. It comes from somewhere. Jordan Maxwell was talking about the 4 great cults, like the solar, the lunar, the stellar, and the Saturnian cults. And the Dionysian cult is a 5th cult. It's another one of these cults. It's also known as the Venus cult. or the cult of the feminine, the Venus, the female symbolism. And so this symbolism comes from somewhere. It's found all throughout the modern rock videos. It's even in the architecture. It's certainly all throughout the James Bond films. Because one of the permutations of Venus is Venice, literally the place Venice. Well, that's why we have Venice turning up in so many rock and pop videos, like Madonna, her very first sacrilegious video, Like a Virgin, right, was shot in Venice. There's, at least 4 James Bond movies are situated there. Umpteen other films are situated there. Venice plays a big role symbolically because it's a secret society place. It's a place that is known in secret society symbolism to mean something, and therefore Venusian symbolism means something, and all the rest of it. There's a huge story there that people need to be up to speed on, because again, my work is about trying to encourage people to have the psychic immunity, so that's how you destroy Big Brother. Once you're immune to the kind of pestilence that they're putting out, well, then it has no power anymore, isn't it? Once the zombie wakes up and says, no, I don't want any more of your Datura, I don't want any more of your injections, well, then they're out of business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's the same power you have with your money. If you don't like some geezer who runs a shop at your corner shop, and you don't shop there, and everybody hates him and won't shop there, well, he's out of business in 5 minutes. It's no different. And everybody's running around going, pulling their hair out. What are we going to do? The world's full of evil people. Yeah, well, stop funding them. I don't mean with money. I mean with your intelligence. Your intelligence, your choice mechanism, is the most valuable thing of all. But we've been given this incredible affluence in the West, and that affluence works like a kind of a bromide. It works like a lure. It helps us to identify with our masters. It gives us this fear of, if I didn't have this, what would I have? I can't do without my toaster and the latest Toyota and the latest SUV, and what would I do if I
iPad, my HD TV and everything else.
iPod and all those things. Yeah.
Looks like we've got a caller here. Let's see here. Gary, you are on the Vantage Point, my friend. Welcome to the program. Gary? Gary going once. Gary going twice. Gary, are you there? Okay, I guess Gary's not there. Gary, give us a call back when you're ready to say something. But, I do think it's interesting. And you mentioned something during the break, about how people sort of check out and from logical, rational thinking into something else. And it reminded me of a movie called Surrogates that Bruce Willis was in, where every person was a part of some sort of virtual reality system where they use mannequins to operate so they would be perfect themselves, but, inside, normally they're just average human beings with the same flaws. And you mentioned something during the break about how these people have a different sort of psyche.
Exactly. It's part of Big Brother's mechanism, again, because it's really ultimately because of what's going on in the minds of the people who run the planet, but how we see it down here is the cultivation of a kind of a pseudo-sanity. We don't have sanity anymore. We don't have reality. We have what's known as pseudo-reality. We have pseudo-emotions, which again, the media is very much part of generating. We have pseudo-reality. It's what the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard called the simulacra. He had many connotations of that word, but he did use it in regards to television. He did use it in regards to modernity. He did use that term. And just the normal dictionary definition of the word is good enough for our purposes. It just means a simulation. Everything is simulated today. And so Big Brother is giving us the option to say, look, if you conform and you adjust to our pseudo-reality, because you do what you're told to do by the parents and by the school and by, the establishment, then we will call you adjusted. We will call you, normal, and we will take care of you. And should you sort of have these moments when you break down, we'll fix you, just like you bring your car in or you bring a computer in for a tune-up. We'll fix you. You see, but that has nothing in the wide world to do with the real reality, the truth per se, and also, about selfhood. But so we have a choice to make again. It's another one of these choices that we're forced to make when we're very young, about whether we're going to conform to this insanity posing as reality or really strive to walk the Siddhartha road to find our own truth. And this is a particular schism, a choice mechanism that is not just confined to our times now. It's actually been going on for quite a while and will continue down through the centuries. And it's a choice that every human being, consciously or subconsciously, has to make. And therefore, no outside force, including Michael Tsarion, can come in and force a person or cajole a person, because you can't violate a person's sovereignty. I can't become yet another tyrant demanding somebody does something even if I think they're right. Well, then you're no better than Big Brother. The point is that everyone at least needs to know that they have that choice, and then they must decide for themselves. And Ayn Rand and these people were saying, look, okay, we will just let you know that this choice exists, and we'll also let you know what the consequences are, so that if you choose the path of irrationality, and if you go for this simulacra existence, there are certain consequences. Ultimately, the consequence is destruction. So Nietzsche and Ayn Rand and Heidegger and so many other great people, and even in the modern world today, we have many, many good activists and people who are trying to warn society about this. They're just telling you what the consequences are. Consequences to nature, consequences to children, the future of mankind, and also, you know, the effect that will have on our culture and our civilization. It's going to bring it down. It's going to destroy it. And the trouble is, though, that once you have made the greater pact, once you've already said, okay, I'm going to buy into this inauthenticity, what we don't realize is that there's a lot of other diseases that arise from that. You may make that choice, but unfortunately there's a lot of satellite problems that orbit around that one as well that affect...
Hang right there, Michael. We're coming to a quick break. VantagePointRadio.com, Michael Tsarion. I do my best, but I'm just one man. Same as Michael Tsarion. As the guy, really breaks down what's going on around the world and in front of your senses, he's one man, and you're a very popular person, and they want more and more out of you, don't they, Michael? Tell us a little bit about some of your future projects and some of the things that we have to look forward to.
Yeah, we're working on, of course, Architects 2, the film, and I've got next couple of weeks or the end of the month, there's 2 more DVDs. They're multi-disc sets, each of them. One's on the trees of life, which is a very deep look at the symbolism that's used by secret societies and has been used by religions pertaining to flora and fauna. Of course, we notice this on military garb. We notice it on the architecture. It's on television. It's in our city streets, and it's in all areas of government. You find this, for instance, on the United Nations logo. You see the laurel leaves, the olive leaves. It was used by the Caesars in ancient times. We go into why Jesus was given a crown of thorns. A really deep look at the tree symbolism. There's at least 3 trees turns up in the book of Genesis. This symbolism is ubiquitous. It ties into the goddess cult, because my work very much focuses on the negative use of symbolism, but then you also have to show that the symbolism itself is not negative. It's just been skewed and it's been misused. But I like to also present more academic work that shows where the symbolism came from, what's positive about it. Like, for instance, why is the Kabbalah known as a tree of life, etc.? Why did Moses meet God at a burning bush? Why is the logo of the Church of Scotland, a burning bush? What's all this about? Where did it come from? Fig leaves, you name it. All of this different floral motifs that we find. The White House has it on the rugs. The military nettles, the cavalry, using the acorns and what have you. That's a huge subject. It was actually a part of the Irish Origins books that I did, but the books were so voluminous we couldn't explore that in detail, so it became an appendices, and then it just started to take on a life of its own, and finally I decided to do it in DVD form with a lot of pictures and show the history of it. And this ties into very many words. I mean, even the word Jew and Judite, Elohim, all the names for God that we could possibly even think of actually go back to trees. I mean, they did show this in the book of Genesis, in which Jehovah meets Moses at a burning tree. There's a huge symbolism there that people need to get into, because it has both positive and negative connotations. We still talk about genealogy as a tree, a family tree, and so forth and so on. But it beautifully ties into the symbolism of the feminine, the female goddess who turns up in artwork, who turns up as the priestess figure in so much of the esoteric tradition. Where does that all come from? You find it in the design of churches. It's all over the place, temples, and all of that kind of symbolism. And so that'll be coming out. Then there's another DVD called Disciples of the Mysterium, which is a philosophical look at the conspiratorial work that I do. So it's just changing the focus a bit and looking at it more from an in-depth philosophical point of view or existential psychological point of view to emphasize more what I mean when I say that it's a psychic dictatorship and that there is this split between the ego and the self. It's properly defining. A lot of work in this field just needs to be redefining the words, what we mean by ego. Because when the Western world speaks about ego and the Eastern world talks about ego, they're actually talking about two different things completely. And there's a lot of misinterpretation of these terms and words. For instance, people like Sigmund Freud's work were so skewed by the translators in America that even his work was very much misrepresented to people. He was actually a more spiritually intoned person than ever people have realized, you see. So even the definition of terms like conscious, unconscious, extrovert, introvert, and so forth and so on, and persona, and all of these terms need to be redefined and relooked at so that we have a really clear understanding.
Hang right there. We'll bring that back up on the other side. This is the Vantage Point. Back with more Michael Tsarion, www.michaeltsarion.com. And if you want to be a part of the program, VantagePointRadio.com. And it seems we have a caller. Let's try you again, Gary, and see if the phone lines are working. Let's see. Gary, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I sure can, man. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, based on what's been talked about, I basically think that a lot of the situation, nothing but vanity. It all goes back to the Garden of Eden when Satan, Lucifer, said, "You shall be as gods. You shall know as gods." And that's, I think that's the problem we have today with everything from the New Age movement to everything from American Idol, all these, realistic programs. I mean, the programs they have on TV that are, they just feed vanity. They feed vanity. And I think the New Age movement, everything from the UFOs, telling people how...
Let's get Michael Tsarion's take on this, so hang a sec. You want to comment on that?
Go ahead.
Well, Gary's right. That's exactly what they do. They're appealing to man's lower drives. As I say, they're trying to acculturate us to a completely sick environment. And this is not from me. This is from the top psychologists that have ever had to pick up the pieces of the wreckage of human beings. These people have engaged in wars to make sure that they can basically ritually slaughter everyone who they knew would have stood against them. And then after that, those periods of wars and wars and wars, you basically, to find a point on it, have just a bunch of genetic garbage walking around with a spattering of conscious people still left who can't believe the world they're living in. And then you turn on the pornographic media, which is the modern world's equivalent of dictatorship, and they're appealing to man's lowest possible drives in the idea that now you're going to have to adjust yourself to these false pornographic models that they've put in front of you. The women are particularly susceptible to this, the young women. And of course we know about the fallout, but we know that they're also buying into it. This whole cosmetic, lie, that you have to be this kind of shape and this kind of height and this kind of look. And it's just repeat, drip feed over the years. If you study the advertisements from the 1950s, nothing has changed. The memes are exactly the same. They have 10 or 5, so it's almost like 5 or 10 basic themes of collectivism, of self-sadism, of hive mentality, of anxiety, or hero worship, or the father figure.
Oh, if you don't buy this particular shampoo, the girls won't like you, and women, if you're not 120 pounds and throwing up every night, then the guys won't like you, and you're not worthy, you're not whole, and everything else. Gary, any finishing points there?
Well, that's exactly right, because it's all temporary. Everything that they, everything that they feed is a temporary thing. It's just, I mean, sooner or later we all get older, and we we have our problems as we get older. But the point of the matter is, it feeds the vanity. It feeds people's temporary and self-satisfaction, self-centeredness, and selfishness to the point where, it's everything from all this Facebook, everything is just immediate gratification now, and you have to, fulfill that gratification.
Oh, absolutely, Gary. Thanks for the call. Phone lines wide open, 1-866-841-1065. And there's a question I've been dying to ask you, Michael. Mankind's really been severely limited in their brain power. And really, the ability to experience reality is about 4% through our, 5 or senses. Do you think it's possible that some sort of intergalactic, interplanetary organization is monitoring the growth of us to see if we will progress or whether we will degenerate? Matter of fact, Charles Osman, I interviewed a couple weeks back here, a scientist was talking about how he believes there are aliens monitoring us. This I never heard him say before. I've interviewed him many times. But there are aliens monitoring us to see what we will do and how we will progress. And if we sort of, degenerate to the point we destroy ourselves, then maybe they will, maybe they'll do it for us. What's your opinion on that?
I don't really buy into that. Anything is possible. We have to keep a very open mind. I do have an alien theory, but it's not quite that kind of theory. I believe that we were visited by aliens thousands of years ago who disaffected our DNA, so we are the aliens. It's part of this primal trauma. It's part of this primal schizoidness that we have to deal with right now. And I just want to say a couple of points about Gary's very, very, good questions there, because this he's referring actually to this thing called malignant narcissism, because he used the word self-interest. And that was what we were talking about earlier, about some of the misdefinition of these terms. Today, one of the most misused of all terms is self. When people are called selfish, actually, if you examine it from a psychological point of view, the things that people do that we might use in normal everyday language, the word selfish, actually what they're doing is the most selfless. It's a strange quirk, and it has to be looked at. You have to use examples of this. Actually, the people we would claim to be the most selfish, or when we appear to be working out of selfish motives, we're actually working out of what is considered altruistic or very selfless motives, because this is the way we've been trained. What Gary was talking about there is actually not really self-interest. That's what it appears on the surface. It's actually a form of malignant narcissism, in which it's the pseudo-self we were talking about that gets the manicure. It's this pseudo-self that gets all the polish and the attention, and this is what the media is focusing on. It's not the real self. So it's just again to underline the fact that the word self, used outside of its purely psychological context, is a highly misused term. One would be more right to talk about egoism. One would be more right to talk about this narcissism, which is absolutely rampant in our society. And we are being infected by this poison from very high up, because these people high up have no sense of self. They are malignantly narcissistic. They are compulsively narcissistic. They only have this hive mentality themselves and the social persona, and that's what they want for the rest of us. And then they create these models through these people's champions that then come on the media, and then we're meant to emulate and mimic and identify with them. And there's very cunning ways of doing this. Part of my work goes in to show how the male archetype, the father figure, for instance, has been deconstructed in sitcoms and in comedies and in general life. And again, this extends to how children are portrayed, how animals are portrayed, how nature is portrayed. In the Age of Manipulation series we're doing, we talk about the horror slasher films, and that the Jesuit order is behind them in order to inculcate a very a feeling within human beings that nature is something foreign and evil and destructive. Again, to pull up your roots, you see, from your inner self, because you are nature.
Talk about that on the other side. We're coming to a quick break. Go to michaeltsarion.com, and if you want to be a part of the program in the chat room, go to vantagepointradio.com. Be back with more with Michael. Too bad that song can't play out. Don't turn around. There are commissars in town, and today in our world, your neighbors are Kamazar, and she's reporting you to the fusion centers because, maybe you just don't buy the propaganda anymore, and you've seen some Michael Tsarion videos, and you know what's going on, and now we're all a target. Now, we're all people. If you don't accept the false paradigms and the false models, you yourself, of course, is got a target on your back, and all of us here sticking out our neck for the sake of just sound-mindedness. But we've got Michael Tsarion here, and Michael, you're going to be at ConspiracyCon in June. Tell us a little bit about that and what we can look forward to.
Well, yes, exactly. I'll be there. It's 5th and 6th of June in the Bay Area, California. A lot of good speakers are going to be there, a lot of my friends. In fact, the guy that puts it on, who invited me this time again, was one of the earliest supporters of my work, right from the very beginning. And in fact, so much so that he allowed me to speak at his conference on subjects that had never been done before. In fact, the Subversive Use of Sacred Symbolism webcast that's up there from ConspiracyCon wouldn't even have got done had he not believed in that thesis. It never would have ever been done in that way. And I've got more hits from that particular upload, than almost any. It costs so much, and as I say, the web is now filled with stuff on this kind of symbolism that has inspired so many people to go and do this kind of work. And it's Brian Hall that really took a chance there to say, this hasn't really been, it's not directly connected with 9/11, blah, 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 but he believed it. He believed it at the time that this would be something people needed to hear, and that was such a great day. And so he's invited me back to do a follow-up on that, the Age of Manipulation talk. And I would encourage people to check out their website, conspiracycon.com, because you got people like Michael Collins Piper is going to speak there, or Jim Tucker. These are excellent, really recommend their work. Dr. Stan Monteith is going to be there. And Michael Collins Piper is an expert on the Israeli lobby, about the Zionist control of America. He's a little weak on the Jesuit aspect, which would be one difference that I have with him. But at the same time, again, these are only micro differences. They're not really important. His work, if people want to really know about the Zionist control of America, they should definitely check out his work, you see. And Jim Tucker as well is an excellent speaker, Stan Monteith. There's a lot of good people there that should be supported, and it's a great weekend to come by and it's really, it's kind of, I always like to go there because it's a chance to be around like-minded people and to meet other individuals, researchers, and members of the public that are awake. That's a really, really good thing. It's very encouraging when you meet people who have that insight rather than having to deal every day with just, people who are completely almost unconscious,
Well, it's wonderful, sometimes people call into the show and they just have that spark, of real genius, it may not be all the time, but it comes across, and it's good to see that, people all over, out here are sort of coming out of this spell, and, there's many ways, into the rabbit hole, into the abyss. And I think that, if you got a basic understanding of what's going on, then there's people out there like yourselves and others that can take us even further.
Well, the danger is, you see, that this information has been in America for a long, long time. But the youth are not being exposed to it. It's like Gary was saying earlier about everything is temporary, everything is in sound bites, everything's reduced to the most 8th grade level. This is information that's out there that the new generation has to pick up on. I got advertisements that I use in my talks, Coca-Cola's original advertisements, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola. There's all sorts of advertisements. In the earliest days, even McDonald's, their first advertisements were all literally geared towards the young. You were young if you drank this drink. It's not for older people. It's for the moment. It's for now. You feel younger. You are younger. This is the young person's drink, all appealing to this idiotic temporariness. It sounds good on paper, right? But what is the difference? It's this idea that youth is the most fleeting of all things. It's literally the most fleeting of all things. And the advertisers...
Well, it sort of reminds me, what Aldous Huxley did, with LSD, and then bringing in the Beatles and everything else, and really creating that. And then later on, in the 70s, there was the big punk movement. Matter of fact, let's talk a little bit about, music and the sort of indoctrination on that route.
Well, certainly. There's whole organizations out there like the Tavistock Institute, and many others. And remember, I talked about the cult of Dionysus. The cult of Dionysus and its satellite groups, like the Process Church, have been heavily involved in influencing members of Hollywood and a lot of bands that came out of England at the time. The Pink Floyd people let you know this. They said that they were approached, that a lot of when they came out of when the music scene bust open in the Chelsea set in England, they had spotted that these psychedelic cult people like Timothy Leary and his coterie had appeared as if by bloody magic. Like puff of smoke, and there they are with their LSD to kind of seduce them and so many other bands. Of course, they didn't go with that gig, but so many other people fell foul of it, unfortunately. But they knew that they need to work on the mind of the young, and here's the way to do it. Through the music, because music is very positive. Music is one of the ways that the unconscious mind speaks to us, and it's one of the ways that is the road to our own true selfhood. But at the same time, you can introduce a Pied Piper type idea that leads the children away from the truth, and you do that by pretending that you are truth, or that you are rebellion, and you create these memes. You put the rest of humanity on the couch, saying, "Oh, look at these older people with their, stick in the mud ways." And then you lure the kids away. And it's the communist movement, the communists and the Fabians of England, through the punk music and these monstrosities like the Sex Pistols and so many other bands, pretending to be revolutionary, pretending to be countercultural, and then being paid off in millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then you have these people like Sting, this creature. He has 15 mansions throughout the world. He's a big advocate for the global society, the EU. Talking
Bono.
about
Oh God, I hate Bono. Oh God.
There's a list is endless of these people who made their fame in a legitimate way in the beginning by appearing to be countercultural. But I always was suspicious of these people because, as you said in the very beginning of your show here, that was where I came into this. I was very interested in what I would describe as the Luciferian atomist solar symbolism, even from a young man. Like when I was 13 years of age, this journey began. As I said, it started with magazines back then, but then the new wave of music in Britain, people will know that the new wave came out, Duran Duran, The Cure, and all sorts of bands like the Communards and the Smiths. It was just loaded with this left-wing communistic symbolism, and I spotted it at the time because my father was a Marxist, and so I had come from, not me personally, but grew up in being surrounded by left-wingers and extreme left-wingers, and just saw that their world was so loaded with contradictions that it was a good place to come from, because then I knew their rhetoric, I knew their gig, I knew what their philosophies were, and I could also spot the contradictions in those philosophies. And we're now seeing those contradictions right now. We're gelled off on these very people like Bono are now serenading Prince Charles. Wait a minute, I thought 15 years ago, we turned over 2 pages at once or something here? One minute these guys are there screaming in the face of Margaret Thatcher and freedom and, hammer and sickle and the people and the workers' paradise. Just exactly in the same way in history as communism itself did, and that's all been melted down. And then 5 minutes later, you see these same people getting OBEs and MBEs and performing in front of the royal family and God bless the Queen and up there in Buckingham Palace or up at Balmoral serenading Prince Charles. I mean, can't people see this, what is going on, and then not think about all those great bands who didn't bow the knee and are kind of forgotten today, like the Stiff Little Fingers and the Undertones and so many other great bands that came out at that time. You don't have to like their music, but the point is there's many bands who didn't conform to all of this. What about them,
Yeah, I mean, there were people that the Beatles emulated, who, like you said, who weren't sycophants of the elites, and these guys, didn't get the sort of popularity that they did. But we're coming to a quick break. On the other side, I want to talk a little about the meta child, which I think is very, very important, and we'll jump into that. Phone calls wide open as well. This is the Vantage Point on my special guest, Michael Tsarion. Be back with much, much more on the other side. MichaelTsarion.com. Michael Tsarion is my guest. This is the Vantage Point. But Michael, I want to talk a little bit about the meta child and the meta children. I've met literally babies who their mother was addicted to drugs, and they have a little bit of issues. But these people, a lot of them are very, very brilliant, and they see through this madness. And, I was speaking to someone, and they were sort of parroting what was on the TV set, and I said something sort of facetiously, but at the same time had a little bit of truth in it. and they recognize what's going on, but it doesn't seem that they have much direction, because once they get in the system, they end up being, victims of all this thing.
Well, exactly. And the work I've done on the Meta-Child, both in the past and I'll continue to do, was largely inspired by teaching children physically. I used to teach at a private school for kids, and we showed a lot of videos, a lot of British sci-fi, American sci-fi. We showed a lot of commercials, and the effect that looking critically instead of cynically at the world had on these kids. And remember, they were from different age groups as well, so it was right across the board. And they became like little Baker Street irregulars. They were running out there, and they were accumulating a lot of the symbolism. Their eyes were starting to be open. They were very much sent the message that they're not broken, it's the society that is broken. You have no idea how their soul starts to breathe at that point, after all the other type of impediments that are thrown in their way of them being disturbed or them being broken. My message to them was that no. The system, the society that you're in is the one that has the problems. You guys are victims of this ambient poisoning that's taking place, part of it through the media. And so rather than try to go cold turkey on them, which is what a lot of people mistakenly do by trying to tell them, okay, you're turning the TVs off, you're gonna do this and you're gonna do that. You can't do that. It doesn't work. You just create another problem if you do that. Better to say, let's look at all the things around you now with critical eyes, so that you see what's behind it. Well, that immediately awakened that inner critical intelligence that all children have. It also went deeper than that. It actually started to activate their natural organic intelligence. Because I believe that all children are meta children. It's just that they have to meet all the conditioning of the world. They are coming in new into the world, and they're going to be they're going to try to resist that conditioning, as we talked about earlier, from this whole pseudo simulacral world, this artificial world that they're living in, and through the hideous advertisement campaigns of Madison Avenue, but also of Mattel and many of the toy companies that are out there to seduce the kids. We know that MTV do incredible research, Saatchi and Saatchi, all these different groups, micro-analyze the children and every aspect of their behavior to try and turn them into the next generation of mindless consumers. And so my work on children was born out of that, very much so, because don't forget also that there's an enormous fallout with all of the different maladies that the kids are having, but those are symptoms of the fact that they have to live and exist in a completely, distorted and abnormal society. And therefore, one needs to address that and try to find out the ways of healing that and sending a message to the children that they're not broken. It's that we are broken. Our perceptions of them are broken.
Well, you've made a very, very interesting point. The fact of the matter is that I think we all have to cope with that. We've all had to cope with that at some point. Like, okay, the world is just bizarro world. And I'm trying to live according to my own ideas and my own sort of view of the world, my own model of reality, and the world and myself intersect. And how do I come into a point where I can accept this craziness at the same time and not lose my mind?
Right. And that's what kids are going through. They're going through terrible, terrible fallout because of what's going on in the world today. And therefore, but it's also very inspiring to see that they can be turned around very easily and reawakened. Their critical judgment, their natural flow of intelligence is going to be much more liquid and alive than, say, the average adult. But then you see so many hideous cases in which, for instance, one example jumps to mind is this video I have of obese kids. And there's one example of a guy who literally weighs about 700 or 800 pounds, and his poor teen, he just eats from morning to night all the worst junk food imaginable because his mind has been completely saturated by their advertising. And there's his mother trying to label the kid as if he's dysfunctional and he's crazy and he won't obey, and she's 750 pounds herself. So, I guess stop. Let's just look at this a minute. The TV cameras have arrived, and you're browbeating this poor kid who hasn't the faintest idea what's going on, and you are equally as heavy as he is? Come on. This is this contradiction. This is this blatant hypocrisy. This is this denial and denial of denial. You are his model. You are the one that he looked to for example. So this is what I'm talking about. There's so many examples of this. So in any work that I do, including the Meta Child, it's not just about children. It's about a critique of the whole of society again. It's about the wall-to-wall lies and hypocrisy and duplicity that we are living in. And my message to people is simply to look at that without self-condemnation. You can have criticalness and you can have judgment, but you don't have to have self-sadism or self-condemnation, which is rampant in our world. All advertising is working on the anxiety circuitries of our mind. They're working on the dark, limbic, regressive, poisonous levels of our mind. Like Gary said, they're working on sound bites. Just this instant gratification. I've gone into that deeply in a lot of my work about how civilization is actually based on delayed gratification. In learning how to delay our gratifications, we become creative, moral, and basically civilized people. The media and the whole matrix of the media control tries to erode that. So this is what's turning the world into perverted, either sadistic, criminal, or, as I said, suicidal people. Because a lot of the aggression that comes about from not wanting to have your gratification delayed, in men, that might be projected, and we find it in crime, right? We find it in psychopathy, and in women, it's often introjected, because this is just the way that the whole male-female paradigm has also been conditioned down through time. So men might project it in acts of violence and in acts of sadism. Women will turn it within in forms of masochism, in bulimia and anorexia, in all sorts of skin breakouts, in deep, deep, deep self-hatred. And then another wing of the media comes along, presents these glowing, angelic, unattainable models who themselves may be as sick as anything in their heads, but of course you don't know that. You're identifying with it because it's on the magazines, it's on the television, and then the poor young girls have to try and identify with that. What does that turn them into? And then these people have so much deep self-hatred. How on earth can they then sustain a legitimate relationship? Their entire relationship to males is going to be based on their dysfunctional understanding of what it is to be feminine. A man's relationship to his girlfriends is going to be deeply disaffected and contaminated by his false understanding of what masculinity is, because he's going to see nothing but negative personifications and renditions of what a male is, or a super violent, super hard-bodied image, which is nothing wrong in that itself, but it's just like if it's at the cost of something infinitely more precious. So in fact, the concepts of masculinity and femininity, as they truly are really becoming invisible. They don't even exist anymore. Each person's vision of who they are is distorted by the projections that they have on other people. And this is what
they have to live like that.
Right.
Yeah.
This is mass psychosis. This is what breeds mass psychosis. Nobody has an understanding of selfhood. And you know what's happening? By the time these people are reaching 22, or at least 25 and 27, their first instinct now, biologically, is to run out and have other kids. So here's children with children.
It's crazy. I know that you mentioned something in your DVDs about how we have to re-understand psychology and behavioralism if we're going to combat any of that. And we're got about a minute to the break, but I do want to talk about that in the final segment with you. But I think it's just unheard of, completely cruel to create these models of people, and they live their lives trying to attain something that you can't attain. And even if they don't, they've got all these different peer groups out there that are doing the same, and you want to be a part of the group, don't you? You don't want to be you don't want to be an outsider, and there's so much pressure.
But here's the clincher. The media knows that those models are unattainable. They're ahead of us. They already know that you can't attain it and are ready and waiting. This is what the danger of the Pied Piper really is. They already know that you're going to be in a mire of self-condemnation, frustration, and depression, because in fact those models are unattainable. They're ultimately completely fictitious. But then knowing that you're going to not attain it, not get the approval of other people, and you'll just waste all this money and time and energy, and then you'll be so self-sadistic, or you'll have a whole cocktail of other, psychic disorders. That's what they're doing. They set these unapproachable models. It's okay to have models. I got them myself. But those models are often those who are encouraging, do as I do. Even Jesus Christ said, what I can do, you can do also.
Or making your own model. I mean, matter of fact, we'll talk about that on the other side. Coming to a quick break. This is the Vantage Point, Tsarion.com. I wasn't really sure what was going on. More on the other side. The bumper knows what I want to hear, and so true. My real education happened long after high school, and I was just thrown out into the world with no clue how to operate in it. My special guest, this is the final segment with him, Michael Tsarion, Tsarion.com. But Michael, let's talk a little bit about really breaking free of the whole idea of behavioralism and relearning psychology to empower ourselves. People like BFF Skinner think that freedom is a risk and that we shouldn't have it, and that him and others, Lippmann, those people in the Tavistock Institute have built this system that works quite well for them, but it is crushing to us all.
It works really well as long as you buy into a few fundamental lies, and that is that man has no spirit, or that he's just been given his soul by religion. You see, it all ties in. There's a lot of falsehoods that people have been conditioned with, as I said, not just in the last whatever amount of years since the Industrial Revolution. We've been programmed for generations with certain very pernicious lie mechanisms that then lead us to the state that we're in. Those who really follow my work a lot and go very deep into it realize that I'm always insisting that we are complicit in the slavery that's going on. I know that's a big piece for people to bite off. It's not for everybody. It takes time to really understand that. You do have to go into certain levels of psychology. But again, people need to only do a little bit of a acid test on themselves. Just just observe how self-sadistic you are every day. Just observe the ways in which you put yourself down, all the way that your mind works about yourself and your capacities in general. Some people, of course, have this more than others. Another little test people can do is just think in your mind. Don't judge it, just think in your mind how much time you spend thinking about the welfare of other people. Because again, I told you we're in a culture in which they try to tell you that aberrant behavior is because you're too selfish. Is that all right? Is that a fact? If anybody's actually observing themselves, you'll find that the self is probably the last thing you've ever thought of. People have not even got even an iota of true, healthy psychological selfhood. That's just a myth. Everything we do in our society is obligation-oriented. It's altruistic. People are walking around throwing these terms around without even the faintest idea, and I can prove it. Just have people conceive, even take like 10 minutes in your life to imagine or to just monitor your own thoughts to see how much the welfare of other people matter in your daily life. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's two, maybe it's a whole family, maybe it's a lot of colleagues. Again, just study it objectively. Do it as if it's in a laboratory. Do not judge it. Just observe that fact, and it will lead you to an incredible conclusion, you see. So there's things we can do every day. And the most important one is this idea of how self-sadistic we have become. That's the key. Because if you can turn that around, if you can observe that, then that leads to a very deep level of awakening about just how powerful these forces are. But they may be powerful, but you can unplug that matrix of control very easily once you've got the psychic immunity to do so. You can't do it by waving placards. You can't do it using the weapons that they've put in our hands. You have to do it through psychological empowerment and through immunity, a kind of psychological immunity that we have never in many centuries. In fact, from the birth of mankind, we've never even come close to that. We've never had the opportunity even to gain that. This is the only era in which we have the opportunity to gain that kind of subjective insight that is required. It comes hand in hand with what the other side is that we're doing, which is to allow people to become aware that there are these predators working on us psychologically, working on our habitat, deciding where the herd will go. But the differentiation of the individual is that, they control the masses, but they don't control me. I'm going to differentiate myself from those masses first. I'm not going to try and cure the world's problems when I myself am walking around diseased. I have to become myself completely immune to their virus in exactly the same way that martial artists know, that anyone involved in sacred art, the sacred arts knows. You must first cleanse yourself. You must completely make yourself invulnerable to their weapons. And once you've done that, only then can you turn around and help another person. You can never save anyone. You certainly can't get into bed with a patient. That's not going to cure anyone. And you can't be walking around, spreading the disease because you're infected with it. You have to be immune. And so my work is all about that, showing various ways in which people can do this. Some of my work is good for some people. Other people may like this part of it. But it's all geared towards that. And it's all about trying to find the subjective space in which you can examine your own consciousness and how this pollution is already instilled like shrapnel in your consciousness.
Well, you know what, Michael, I've sat, people don't even know this, that, you can sit there and just not even think about anything you sort of had this sort of brain chatter, some people call it the talking monkey, and you hear all sort of negative, ideas, or I'm dumb, or I'm not too smart, or I'm lazy, or I'm this, or I'm that, and we're the ones doing this to ourselves. And you're right, we're the diseased, hoping to cure someone else, and we're ailing ourselves. It's a perfect point. We've got to polish ourselves. We've got to discipline ourselves if we're ever able to do anything about this. And it's not about what I can do for you. It's about what I can do for me, and then serve as that example.
Well, you see, exactly. And we are a bit more familiar with the outward form of it. We know when we're being put down by other people and we don't like it, when people are criticizing us. The external version of this is pretty much understood. When we have critical people tell us we're not good enough or making fun of us and all of that. We don't examine when we are doing it to ourselves. It's almost like a tremendous blind spot there. And this is what, I think needs to be looked at much more. Of course, this goes also deeply into the difference between jealousy and envy. When you see these perfect models up there, there's a difference between having jealousy, which is actually okay, it's healthy. It's a jealousy of saying, look what that guy's got next door, he bought himself a really nice car. You're not thinking that he shouldn't have that car. You just wish you had one. Well, that's natural to human beings. You're not going to be able to erase that. Envy, however, is a totally deeply poisonous thing in which you see a person who's got something great, good looks, a car, or they've been successful at work or whatever, and your envy wishes they would not have it. You actually wish that you could take it away from them. First of all, you want it, whether you deserve it or not, and you're even jealous or envious of the fact that that person has earned that thing. So there's different poisonous levels of this, you see. So once you examine one end of this, when you get a hold of one tentacle of how your mind works in this way, then it leads into all the others. And it's important to look at all those psychological hang-ups we've got and why they exist. And just like I was able to show the kids, it's not you. These are not going organically from in your head. You're in a sick culture that makes you think like this, that creates such an abyss within you, such an absence of self, that then you are totally dependent on the models of other people and what they have, and then the approval. And as we said before the break, Big Brother knows that you're not going to get that approval, so you're going to become a neurotic individual, meaning that you'll sacrifice even what's left of your selfhood in order to get it. Now you need mommy and daddy to approve, you need your girlfriend and boyfriend to approve, you need your peers and your friends to approve of you, and you'll do anything whatsoever to get it, including self-murder. You'll conform to such an extent, it's like these guys walking around in those Benetton shirts that you were talking about, or all the way the advertisements are, or even the way the dances, these pop dances are orchestrated is to one body is 100 people are one body. 100 cells are one intelligence. You will literally conform. And we have many, many obscene things in history that show you that this is exactly what happens when there's a meltdown taking place. The drowning of the individual. The assassination of what is unique and individual, but yet under the guise of individuality, under the guise of pseudo-individuality. They got to create the smoke screen to mean if you drink this cola, if you buy this shirt, if you drive this car, hey, you're individual, you're different. You're standing outside the mall. You use a mask.
You're outside the box. You've hit the nail on the head, Michael. And we're in the final minute of the show, and I want to say that it's been a blast. And as your schedule allows, we'd love to get you back on the show and discuss more of this. And I have to do more research on my own so I can be able to keep up with you.
Well, again, I've just put up the new YouTube channel, Unslaved Films, and also unslaved.com is the website. go there and watch The Age of Manipulation. There's some great stuff I'm putting up there right now. It's my first official YouTube account. There's lots of other ones out there with my name on it, but they got nothing to do with me personally, so I'm really excited about that and get some really positive feedback on that. And then Conspiracy Con people can come there to see the live talk on symbolism if they're up to that.
Well, after the show, I'll have all the information up on the website, VantagePointRadio.com, and go to MichaelTsarion.com. It's been a blast. This is the end of the show. It's been a pleasure, Michael. We have to do it again sometime, and for everyone else, there's much more to be had on Oracle Broadcasting. We'll see